Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
We're going to move into chapter 5 of Daniel this evening, but we have to finish up chapter 4. I think we stopped at verse 31. Yeah, we stopped last week on 31, around 31. When the vision was fulfilled that Nebuchadnezzar had, and verse 32, it says, and you will be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place will be with the beasts of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whomever he wishes. And this is what Daniel told the king Nebuchadnezzar, with the interpretation of his dream was. And at this point, as we've been reading along, Nebuchadnezzar see himself as a god. He doesn't recognize the true God, as most of the kings did back in those days. They considered themselves God. They considered themselves the most important person in the world, or out of the world for that matter. They considered themselves gods. So that's what I just read verse 32, and verse 33 says, immediately concerning the king immediately the word concerning King Nebuchadnezzar came true. As he was talking as he was walking along in his palace and saying certain things about himself, to himself, we said he was walking on the roof of the palace, reflected and said, it is not Babylon the great, which I myself has built, and my might, the power and the glory of my majesty, everything was his. He considered himself not only God, but everything he had and accumulated, and the whole world he built with his own hands, with his own might, under his own power. And as he was doing this, as he was walking along, talking to himself, the dream was fulfilled at that point, at that very time. Before he can get it all out of his mouth, the dream was fulfilled. So it says, until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird's claws. So he was out there for a while. He was out there in the wilderness, and as a beast, living as a beast, eating the grass like cattle. His hair growing. He didn't have a barber out there to cut his hair. He didn't have all his his subordinates out there to take care of him. So and he in his mind, and more importantly, in his mind, he was a beast. He wasn't just out there. God made it so in his mind he was a beast. He thought of himself, he was a beast. He couldn't think as a man anymore. He couldn't function as a man anymore. He was actually a beast. So until the period when he lifted his eyes, God touched him. And he lifted his eyes to heaven, and his understanding returned to him, and he was blessed by the Most High. and he honored his life forever. That's 1 Samuel 10:9. Let's go there for a minute, for a second. And I'll read that. And it reads, "Then it happened when he turned his back to leave Samuel, God changed his heart." That's what happened to Nebuchadnezzar out there. And all those signs came about on that day. His sanity was returned to him. His wherewithal, his ability to think, to function, everything returned to him that God had taken away from him. And at that point, the scripture said his aides and his people accepted him back into the kingdom. Okay, and at that point, everything that Nebuchadnezzar had was restored to him in even greater amounts. His reasoning, his honor, his brightness, his counselors and lords, and he was reestablished as the king and majesty. Everything was restored to him. In 2 Chronicles 33:12, there's a couple scriptures I want to read here. 2 Chronicles 33:12. It's the first one. You don't have to go to all these scriptures. I'm just going to read them to you. But if you're there, it says, "When he was in distress, he entreated the Lord his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers." That's a different way of thinking for King Nebuchadnezzar after he came out of the wilderness. When his reason and his faculties was restored back to him, he's singing a different tune. Job 5th chapter 17th verse is the next one I'll read. And it says, "Behold, how happy is the man whom God reproves. So do not despise the discipline, of the Almighty." The same book, chapter 40, and the 12th verse. Fortieth chapter, 12th verse. And it reads, "Look on everyone who is proud and humble him, and tread down the wicked where they stand." These are all lessons for us. These are all little tidbits that the Bible teaches us. 1 Kings 3rd chapter, 13th verse. It reads, "I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there will not be any among the kings like you all your days." And we know from the scripture that he was the greatest king at that point. He was the biggest, had the largest kingdom. He commanded the largest amount of the whole world, as the scripture says, the known world at that time. So the next one is Proverbs 3:16. And it reads, "Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor." And the last one, Hosea 14th chapter, 9th verse. And it says, "Whoever is wise, let him understand these things. Whoever is discerning, let him know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the righteous will walk in them. but transgressors will stumble in them. So all of this is happening to King Nebuchadnezzar at this point. And when he gets back into the fold, he gets his kingdom back and he has his audience again. Verse 37 starts out with, I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven. So at this point, he's a changed man. It took God stripping him of everything, making a beast out of him, until he recognized who the true God was, before he actually was saved and became a righteous king, as opposed to the type of king he was before that happened. Some of the lessons of, and that was the 4th chapter of Daniel. Some of the lessons I wrote some notes down. Who was the supreme ruler? Verse 29 through 32. We know who the supreme ruler was, who the ruler is, and that's God. And lesson number 2, verse 33. Sometimes revelation comes through pain. This happened to, as you see, this happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He went through some pain. Lesson 3 in verse 34. There's no hole so deep that God can't lift you out of. He was hopeless when he was out there. No one else could do anything for him.
Was he hopeless or was he mad?
I don't think he wasn't, because he didn't have the mind of a man.
I'm not mad mind. Was he mad?
Mad, crazy. He probably was that. He probably was crazy. He probably was a beast. And I looked this up a little bit, the difference between a beast and a man. Is his thoughts. A man has the ability to think, and a beast doesn't. Imagine that. Imagine you're a man and now you're a beast, and then you're a man again.
How did you remember those things?
Exactly. Exactly. And the scripture here doesn't say that he remembered those things. But go ahead.
But what it says in 34 is that he said that Nebuchadnezzar lifted my eyes to heaven and my understanding returned.
Right.
So you saying the difference between a man and a beast is their understanding, their mind. So his understanding returned.
So how would he know to lift up his eyes to God?
Well, when God finished chastising him, when God finished punishing him, he allowed it. So how long did he stay in that position though?
Well, he was in that position for a bit.
7 years.
For a while, and
7 years.
And up until that point, he didn't have the wherewithal, the capacity to do what he did. And the other thing, beasts don't look up usually; they looking down, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, and 20 verse 28, it's all about the pride and arrogance of King Nebuchadnezzar. It's I this, I that. Then you go down to 35, 34, and 35. It's he. Now he recognizes. But he had to chew on grass for 7 years.
Right.
Before God will allow him to
And it was that self-praise of himself, which is the catalyst that God say, okay, you're done. That's it.
Well, also remembered as we spoke last week, he gave him it was 12 months, right, Kenna?
Yeah.
12 months from the time that he
The reprieve.
dreamed, okay, and the dream
Yeah.
was given to him.
Yeah.
And then it was 12
Before it
months,
was
guys,
carried
okay,
out.
done.
Yeah.
Okay. And as you said, as the words were coming out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Okay. Because he's full of pride. He's talking to everybody, but I did this, I did that, as it would come out of his mouth. So.
And go ahead.
Like, look at some that was said here Daniel chapter 4, verse 15.
Mm-hmm.
He makes a statement in here before he goes out. He says, "Yet leave the stump with the roots in the ground,
Mhm.
but with a band of iron and bronze around it." Okay. So what he's saying is the kingdom will be protected, even though the king is going to be gone.
Right, that's good.
Okay. Now it just goes to show that God doesn't need a human king. But
Mhm.
God sustained Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar was gone. See, it's like Israel without a king.
Mhm.
They didn't always have a king. It was theocracy. God ruled and God operated. He was king. And so Babylon didn't need a king. And this is one of the lessons that we see in there that Nebuchadnezzar learned. God didn't need a human king.
Yeah.
You know, but yet he chooses to put a king in if he so desires.
Right.
Now, so in protecting the kingdom, you know, we need to see that God didn't replace Nebuchadnezzar with another human king.
Right.
Okay, for 7 years. Okay. Now, if we look over in if we look over verse 33, it talks about his appetite.
Mhm.
Okay. Nebuchadnezzar, as he was sent out, he was in his natural zone because God had put him out there, and he lived naturally as a beast would live. He wasn't out there feeling like he was being punished because he gave him the heart of a beast. So everything
Right.
that a beast would desire, he desired.
Right.
So eating grass to him wasn't a problem in this, you know, in these times.
Right. Right.
So God still protected him, though it's punishment and chastisement. Sometimes we feel like God has done it, but He protect us in chastisement because see, had He not given him an appetite, he could have died. But also He gave him. It says here He gave him feathers. You know, for
Like a
protection.
bird.
So He's still protecting him out there, and He gave him claws like a bird.
Claws like a bird. Yeah.
Okay, to defend himself while he's out there.
Yeah.
And also to catch his other food fighters. So God didn't basically put him out there
Didn't
with the
abandon.
intentions of, if you do good, I'll bring you back, because before he got this book, he said 7 times. And so when they sent him out, he had already had a set time. And he
To
was
bring him
gonna
back.
bring him back. Yeah, like he had a set time for him to repent, which was 12 months he did. So
Yeah.
we want to see, though Nebuchadnezzar did what he did and God sent him out, it wasn't a total abandonment. God was still caring for him because who supplies the grass?
God.
You see what I'm saying? Who supplies the earth? God still supplied all that for him, even though he lifted himself up in pride. Just wanted to point that out here, especially with the kingdom. God doesn't need human leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does a man have that God hadn't gave him? This is actually God's kingdom.
Yeah.
He stands up kingdoms and he turned down kingdoms. And so this is actually, Babylon is God's kingdom. He stood this kingdom up in Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar needed to realize that, you know, he's the king of kings, not Nebuchadnezzar, God is.
And this showed a few things. I thought about what God did. He did for the benefit of the people. So now they can see that their king is out here living like a beast. He did this for the benefit of the king. He's going to change the king's heart. The king's going to become a righteous man, whereas before he was not a righteous man. He did, it wasn't just the king that he was, like you said, he wasn't punishing the king. Okay, what he did was he changed the king's heart. But then at the same time, the people, they could see their king, their former king, out there living like a beast. And so I saw it in a couple of different ways, and who benefited from this, and it just proves that God was, from the beginning to the end, God was orchestrating all of this. And we have to realize, we know, we as Christians know that is true. And he's still orchestrating everything today, even as we speak. We don't live in Babylon, ancient Babylon, but this is our Babylon. And we have some of the same issues and problems that they had back then. Go ahead.
Well, when you made this statement you made is that not only did his people, but the captives seen what was going on, so they could God was bringing that attention to them also. You need to return back to your ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fourth lesson was only the things of God last forever. And that's in verse 34 through 37. I'm going to Isaiah 40th chapter again, verse 6 and 7. And I'm going to read that real quick. And it says, a voice says, call out. Then he answered, what shall I call out? All flesh is grass, and all its loveliness is like the flower of the field. Nebuchadnezzar, unbeknownst to him, because he's not aware, a lot of things was happening. A lot of things was happening to him. A lot of things was happening for him. He wasn't aware of none of this because he was like a beast when he was out there until God decided to bring him back, and he looked up towards heaven and his reasoning was returned. His senses was returned. In the last lesson, lesson 5 of that particular chapter, and then we'll move on into chapter 5, was our response. What's our response to that? We should tell of the things of God. We should not keep them to ourselves through embarrassment, or whatever the case may be, whatever your problem is. We should tell of the things of God. As God works in them, he uses our testimonies to encourage other people. You never know who you're influencing unless you're paying attention. And even then, sometimes you don't know. So whatever good that happens to us, and something's always good happening to us. God is always working in us and for us. Share those things with other people, because you never know who you may touch, who you may encourage. You may be the avenue to Christ for them. Martin Lloyd-Jones, he was, you probably don't know him, but this is something I looked up. He said that say again? He was, yes, I'm just saying that. Yeah. All of mankind's history could be expressed like this: man formed, man deformed, man informed, and man transformed. I thought that was pretty good, pretty accurate, and so that's why I jotted that down. So we're going to move on into chapter 5. Hopefully we can get through it. Probably not. Chapter 5 starts out with Belshazzar's feast. Now, Belshazzar was the king of Babylon. This is after Nebuchadnezzar and Nebuchadnezzar's son. And, so some years went by till Belshazzar became the king. Now, in some of the manuscript says his son or his father, but back in those days, any male ancestor was father, or any, your grandson was considered son. That's just what they called them.
No Hebrew word for grandfather.
Right, or grandson.
You'll see in the genealogies when you say so and so, the son of so and so, it could be the grandson or great grandson.
Right. And that's why it says his father Nebuchadnezzar, but it was really his grandson who took over Babylon, King Belshazzar. Couple things, lessons in this fifth chapter. Number one, what is the spirit of Babylon at this point? Number two, what did God think of Babylon at this point? Number three, what did God do? And number four, what is our response to what God did? At this point, Babylon, King Belshazzar was all about self-pleasure. It was a big party. He had a big feast, and everything was superficial. Everything he did was for self-pleasure. Was for, he didn't, no, basically he didn't recognize the true God. He went right back to serving the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, stone, whatever, anything made, he worshiped. He didn't worship the true God. This feast was for 1,000 of his nobles, and I'm sure others was there, sentries, wives, whatever else. But anyway, he had this feast for his people, and they was drinking wine and being merry and, chilling out. Not really chilling out. They was making a lot of noise, I guess. That's the spirit of what Babylon was expressing at this particular time. They would just live for today. Let's do what makes us happy. And go ahead.
We had talked one night about these feasts, and one of the things we mentioned about the feasts, but they would not only eat, this was actually an orgy going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Group sex is nothing new. Okay.
I didn't write that in my notes, but yeah.
Trying to keep no clean.
I understand up here.
And we're talking about the mass killing of animals. So about this is a little cheap part here because they bring in 6,000-7,000. So there was a lot of mass killing of animals and all of the concubines, the wives, all of the king's servants. So a whole lot was going on there. So when we see feast here, go back and read the history. We talk about non-calendar reading. What all happened in these feasts that they had? It was more than just eating and dancing.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on with their gods, with each other, the change of relationships. So when we said that, it wasn't just about the food with Daddy, it was all the other stuff that came on with the feast. So all this is going on. So as we get to this story, and also now, just keep in mind, it doesn't say here, but like you said, this just didn't happen immediately. The years go by. Yeah. And as we get to the end of the story, we'll see Danny is probably about 85 years old now.
Yeah. He's an old man at this point. Yeah.
So just going into this, just kind of put that out there. So as we see this, we're not talking about a 17-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Because Belshazzar became in power 41 years after the death of Nebuchadnezzar.
Right. And Nebuchadnezzar's son was in power after Nebuchadnezzar, but actually, Belshazzar's father is the real king at this point. So Belshazzar is the second in command. Belshazzar's father was out pillaging,
That's why he'll say he'll make Daniel third in command because he's second in.
Exactly. So that's I wanted to point that out because when I read it, you'll know what it means. He wasn't second in command. He would be third in command because Belshazzar was second in command. Go ahead.
And it's when it comes to the culture or the times that were going on here, it's very important, like Pastor Allen said, that you pay attention to what these feasts was, because although yes, the sexual and it's more than that, because to commit a feast, we look at how the Hebrews committed feasts, right? A lot of times with the sacrifice of an animal, they would do it, they would clear it, these feasts, these festivals came about. Well, Baal was another worship. It's actually the beginning of his name, but through translation turned to Bel. but in the beginning of his name is B-A apostrophe A-L, and then the rest of it. That means that Baal is what he looks to for protection. So when they commence these feasts, you have to look, all of those people that worship God, the commencement of feast meant we're going to do our sacrificial rituals that we normally do. And these particular people in Babylon, it's talked about, they sacrifice babies. So if you think you're having 1,000 feasts for a prince, of course we're going to see baby sacrifice, because that's what we do. That's how we give honor to our God. This is the offense that when any of you hear the other cultures are talking about their feasts, they're not talking about just sitting down at grand table. They're talking about big burning altars. People's children have been brought in. This is an abomination. Feast is it. A feast would have been the word that if I told another Hebrew and said that the king has held another feast. To you and I, that means somebody died, somebody baby died. Somebody baby was brought to the fire and put in for a sacrifice, or willingly. Willingly. These are the things when we hear feast of other nations, of other cultures in the scriptures. Don't look at it as just a banquet of food because it said 1,000 princes of the kingdom. Yeah, look at it as if they would have taken the full right to impress these kings and princes. Oh, you here? I'll sacrifice 3 days just for you. You show up. So on that day, you might have had, what did it say, 1,000?
1,000 nobles.
That was,
I
was the nobles. So
I say it was wives, concubines, and
So you can
There
only
were
imagine the sacrifice that was made that day. Animal,
they
people.
didn't only bring in to eat birds and cows. They brought horses, camels, they brought in some meat.
Anything with humans, anything was on the board. So I was just kind of, digging on the second half of like how serious it is when we see these people at feast.
see now today we call that barbarianism, but that was a way of life back then. That's the way it was. It wasn't barbarianism. Well, it was, but it wasn't called barbarianism. It was called, this is what we do.
Social way.
But at the same time, you have to look. We just finished chapter 4, right?
Mhm.
You said Nebuchadnezzar was saved. 41 years past right now, everything is reverting back,
Yes.
going back because they do not recognize that one God. They recognize all the gods except the great God.
Yes, yes. And you'll see by the end of chapter 5, which we probably won't get to tonight,
Yeah, we
you'll
will.
see what the cost is, right?
Going into it. Okay.
Yeah.
So during this feast, Belshazzar gave orders to bring in the gold and silver vessels, which his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, right? Remember that?
Mhm.
He had taken all these things, sacred things from the temple in Jerusalem, took them back to Babylon. But then Belshazzar did something Nebuchadnezzar didn't even do. All right, but Nebuchadnezzar took them, but he didn't do what Belshazzar's getting ready to do here. Belshazzar ordered these vessels brought into his, whatever
Party.
you want to call it, banquet, party, feast, so they could drink from them. They drink their wine from these vessels. And I think scriptures call it forget the word that it used, but they desecrated the vessels of God in their blatant disrespect and non-belief in God. They believed in only their own gods, the silver, the gold, the bronze, and whatever they made. Yeah. So they did. They brought those vessels in and they drank from the wine. They praised the gods as gold, silver, bronze, and iron. But something happened when this was going on. And as I'm reading, I'm trying to put myself in that position. And it was astonishing. It was mind-boggling to me. I wasn't drunk, but I could imagine. I was only drunk one time in my life, and I don't even remember it. So
You really drunk, yeah.
that's why I was only one time in my life. But anyway, something happened while this is going on. And we're talking about, we just got done talking about the spirit of Babylon. All of that we just talked about. That's the mind frame and the spirit that Babylon was in at this particular time. All fun and games. Live for the day. Let's party like it ain't no tomorrow. That's their mindset. We see that the humility and faith that King Nebuchadnezzar had come out into did not carry over with the king Belshazzar. Their attitude at this time represented three things. Number one, life was a party. Number two, they worshiped created things, like I said. And number three, they were self-confident. And each one of those things, I got a few notes written down. Life was a party. History tells us that these parties were essentially drunken, immoral. I didn't use the word that you used, Ken. Immoral gatherings sanctioned by the king. I cleaned it up a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. I do it my way. Sanctioned by the king, right? And the motto was live for today, live for pleasure. And it was a hedonistic way of life that they were enjoying, that they were perpetrating. Yes, go ahead.
I like the word you used, hedonistic, which continue on to hedonism. You know, and we hear these things like of this party, and we think that it's so far off, or so far gone from this time, or even if we just try to, you know, loosely base it to, you know, or this part right here, that part right here. There's actually a resort in Jamaica that does the same exact thing. And it's called hedonism. People go there yearly just to. Look, what I'm saying is,
It's in several different parts of the world.
right, but just particular to
Yeah.
think that this isn't a far removed thing. It happened yesterday to somebody. You see what I'm saying? So I only say that because when we read it, sometimes me particularly, I can't speak for anybody else. Sometimes I have to remind myself that I'm not reading something about a far off place or a far off time, or, you know, something that transpired one time and God snuffed it out right then and there. No, these are still examples. So I'm aware of the feast and the parties.
And they're still sacrificing babies today sometimes. Well,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know why I chose that word, but you know, that's what came to my mind. This is what I'm thinking about. And like I said, I try to put myself in that time, in that situation. And I've been to some places that I never should have seen some things, but I did. And you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys in the military, you've been some places, seen some things that we don't do here in our country. Yeah, you did too. We don't condone, I should say, here in our country. Some people here do it too, but it's not popular here in our country. Some of the I remember telling my sons, because I got two boys. I remember telling them a long time ago when they were little, said, watch who you communicate with, watch who you love, especially if you know, find yourself in the military in some of these countries that I've been to, because there are countries out there where it's their way of life. You know, prostitution, things of that nature. That's how they live. They don't have jobs like we have. That's their job. And, you know, like I said, I've seen some things that I shouldn't have seen, and nobody should see them. But it's happening, and it's still happening today. Nothing new under the sun. Hedonism is a thing that's alive and well right now. And you know, I told my boys, you know, especially because I had a son that went into the Air Force, and he went to some of these countries, and you know, I guess he forgot when he was little, when I was telling him. He didn't forget it all, but you know. He'd been to some of these places and he saw some of the things that I was telling him about. So he could, you know, he saw it coming. He knew what to look for because I tried to school him on that. So my other son, he didn't go in the service, so he didn't visit a lot of these places, but he did go to Vegas. Vegas is just as bad as some of these other places. I spent some time there too. But anyway, back to the scriptures. The second point was they worshiped created things, and we already talked about that. They worshiped the gods of silver and gold, yet they mocked the true and living God. Belshazzar used the sacred items from the Jewish temple to worship his God, while at the same time emphasizing his superiority over the true God of Israel. And that was the second point of this. The third was they were self-confident. If you can, I think we talked about it earlier, but at this point, they are so powerful. The walls of this country at this point is, they're so high and they're so thick. The outer wall was thick enough to where they could ride chariots on top of the wall. This is how fortified this place was. That was the outer wall. Right. And they had an inner wall as well. So you couldn't breach the outer wall. But if you did, it was a suicide mission because they had an inner wall as well. The way it was built, the way it was, and this was during Nebuchadnezzar's days when he restored and rebuilt, and all of this happened. You know, Belshazzar didn't do this. This is the country that he inherited. This is the way Babylon was when he took the reins. So we see that this was well fortified, and the scriptures tell us it was the greatest kingdom in the world at this point, at that time. So they were confident, they were arrogant, they didn't think they could be, and defeated. No one ever tried to defeat them. No one ever, it's like, okay, I can't even breach the outer wall. I have a second wall that I have to breach to get into the city. So Bible doesn't speak of any nation or any kingdom or king or adversary trying to overthrow the city of Babylon. But history tells us that as they were partying, the Medo-Persian Empire was right outside the walls of Babylon. If you look up on the picture of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream, you see the top of the gold, the head was Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon. Right below that, you see the kingdom of the Medo-Persians. So we're getting to the point here now where we're coming to the close of the Babylonian Empire. They didn't know it. Belshazzar was partying it up. He didn't have any worries. He didn't care about anything. He had everything he wanted. Double fortified city. No one could get to him. But God said otherwise. Okay. We're going to go, that was verse 1 through 4, and I'm going to go to Isaiah 47, and I'm going to read verse through 11. And it reads, "But these two things will come on you suddenly in one day. Loss of children and widowhood. They will come on you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries, in spite of the great power of your spells. You felt secure in your wickedness and said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and your knowledge, they have deluded you. For you have said in your heart, I am, and there is no one besides me. Verse 11, but evil will come to you, which you will not know how to charm away. And disaster will fall on you, for which you cannot atone. And destruction, about which you do not know, will come on you suddenly. This is what's about to happen to Babylon and King Belshazzar, as they're partying it up in the palace with no cares in the world, not caring what's going on outside, because he's so secure in their security of the city and in their
The prophecy was exactly against Babylon too. We talked about how drunk they were. History says that they were so drunk, it was said that not even an arrow was shot. They walked in and just massacred. Usually you take arrows and have to shoot. But these people were so drunk, half of them probably don't even know that they were being killed.
and I got a theory about that too, that I was thinking about. Yeah, the vast number. But it was some close to home, close to the king, that saw the writing on the wall. I think they sobered up real quick. All right. We'll get to that a little bit later. Because if I was thinking I saw a handwriting on the wall, I think I straighten up a little bit, right? I
You can see what they did.
even if I was drunk, I think I know what I'm looking at.
You become sober.
I become sober. That's what I'm saying. Isaiah's prophecy tells us what God thought of this Babylonian spirit. When he says wanton creature, that means sexually loose, senseless. Yeah. When they use the phrase "I am," what I just read, I have no need, not even of God. Isaiah says that disaster will come upon you and you will not know how to conjure it away. And this is all in verses 1 through 4. And starting with verse 5 is what God did. And we know what he did was the writing on the wall. So the fingers of a hand appeared and wrote on the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. Now I'm reading that and it escaped me the first time, but as I'm reading, you read it a few times. It is the reason why it was written near the lampstand, right? Because it's, you visit the party or whatever, some places it's dark in there, and they're drunk, so they don't know whether it's light or dark, right? So, but this hand was writing next to a lampstand, so it's easy to see. Now, scripture doesn't say that specifically here, but it says it was written near the lampstand. So I'm imagining if I'm around the king, I'm close in the same vicinity of it. I can see this hand. If I can't see nothing else, I'm gonna see this hand. And I don't see a body attached to it. I just see a hand. So I'm getting ready to get sober.
Can I help you a little bit about that lampstand?
Yeah.
All right. So when I brought in all the stuff from the temple, all of the different things, this lampstand, it has a specific name. It's called a menorah.
Yeah.
So when it wrote over the lampstand, it was insinuating like, I know what y'all did. This stuff doesn't belong here. It was specifically, If certain texts have changed, but in certain older texts, it said, wrote it over the menorah. Which this was also something that those kingdoms have seen before and dealt with before in the Maccabee books.
Yeah.
And things that are coming forward. You'll start to see how the items that are supposed to just be in the temple, they have specific rules, places they're supposed to be. So for them to even have that menorah in there, out of the place where the Hebrews was considered their holiest of holy, and you already violated. So it specifically said the lampstand, one probably foresight, but I doubt they had it lit. They did, that was just a piece of gold to them.
Yeah, they had specific purposes. Each
They had
one of those
specific
things, each one of those vessels, the lampstand, everything had a specific purpose in the Hebrew. But not to them. As you can see, they did not recognize that at all.
This, with all the other vessels, remember when they took the last, of the wave.
Second
from
wave,
No, when they took the last wave from Judah, they tore down the temple
yeah,
and
Destroyed
they
it.
took some more people. And they took all the tools that it would take for them to guard it. And they left the people. And then they turned around and said, well, in case they try to worship apart from the temple, we'll take everything that they worship with. And so what you have here along with the others, but here's what displayed in the lampstand that was supposed to be used in the holy place that lit the whole room. It set against a wall that was overlaid with bronze. So when the light hit the bronze, it lit
Reflection.
the whole room.
reflection.
Okay. So me personally, I think it was lit because when they wrote it where the most light was.
Yeah,
Okay, so now you wrote it in the light, not only you see, but God is writing it, because he see what y'all doing.
God is light, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, he's writing in a sense so you can see,
Mhm.
and God sees, because what you have here is a holy thing, and you're desecrated, because it's supposed to be only used for holy use.
Yeah,
Okay, and you got it in the midst of the shindig you got going on.
yeah, that's a good name for it, yeah. Yeah. So the king watched his hand as it wrote. Now, the king was drunk just like his subjects. He turned pale. Scripture says he turned pale and was frightened. His knees knocked and his legs gave way. I think that's that's putting it mildly, at least in my way of thinking. I don't know. I don't know. That's the legs giving away part. Broke at the hip, so he was down. Jelly leg, knees knocking on the way down, everything. And he was drunk. Like Ken said, they were so drunk that they didn't know the metal persons was right outside the wall, getting ready to, come in. That didn't matter. The king shouted for his conjurers, Chaldeans, and diviners to be brought in to read this writing and tell him what it meant. And whosoever could do that would be made third highest ruler in the kingdom.
Then back to what you said, like the first king, the second king, they couldn't make him the highest ruler, the second highest ruler.
Made him
They
the
had to
third.
make him the third, yeah.
Right. Because Belshazzar's father was actually the first king. Belshazzar was the second. And whoever could accomplish this would be the third, yes. The king and his nobles and his entourage did not let even the Medo-Persian Empire spoil his party. He didn't care about that. He was confident and arrogant. But then a strange hand turned his laughter to fear. Can you imagine what they were thinking at this moment? Shock, fear, suddenly sober. Again, all of the above. I couldn't really wrap my mind around the enormity of it. I just know you know, what I might have felt at that point and what I might have thought at that point. And yes,
I'll start with Brother Dave, and we kind of talked about this pastor here. And the reason they was afraid, I mean, had they been worshiping
Mhm.
God and the hand would have came out, they wouldn't have been afraid. But it's because they were sinning and this happened. That's why they was afraid.
okay,
And I use the example that if my mom came in the room and I was drawing in the coloring book, you know, I wouldn't be afraid that she walked in on me.
Mhm.
But if I was a child and I was playing with magic and she walked in the room, because the same mom walked in, what I was doing was wrong, I would be afraid.
yeah, you're doing something you ain't got no business.
Right. And so immediately they knew the vessels, one belonged in the Holy of Holies. Okay, and they knew consciously built in every person was more conscious. And so when you see this, you know that, you know, hey, you're getting judged.
Yeah.
You know, somebody or something is gonna deal with you. They knew they were doing wrong, but it came to light, again, that light, when they saw the fingers. It was only the fingers doing the right and the necessary part to right, even though later on they saw the
Right.
back of the hand.
I agree with you. I think God took it to another level. He didn't put a body on that hand. He just sent the hand and the fingers are right. I think that would scare anybody. I agree with you saying. I think God just, you know, unlike us, God took it to the next level. In my mind, that was serious.
And I'm just really thinking about this because, you know, in thought, I'm with you. I think it would scare every man to see a hand just protruding out of nothingness, writing in stone. It would frighten everybody. But I also can see it from Pastor Allen's point of view,
Yeah.
where when you think about these people, this isn't a first, like, these are people of his, like, I think with us now in this day and age, it would freak me and you out to see a hand pop out of the wall. It would. I mean, but these people, I don't think with them experiencing it, they're closer to the beginning than we are.
But are you saying that maybe they might have saw a hand before? I don't
No,
think
no,
so.
no. What I'm saying is this, like, so in my 44 years and however old you are, have you seen
I'm
anything
not
fall?
telling you.
Right, have you seen anything fall out of the sky recently? Have you seen any, has it been anything over this time? But these people in the scriptures, they were experiencing things like this on a consistent basis, and a lot of it, even going back however many years, your grandfather, Nebuchadnezzar, went from eating grass for 7 years straight, didn't die, to come back in here and be king. To me, that should be, that's family. That's not a cousin. That's not a story that you heard in the street. That's somebody saying, your grandfather ate grass. If somebody told me I ate grass for 7 years, I mean, my grandfather ate grass for 7 years, I would be a little startled with the hand coming out, but I might understand it as well. You see what I'm saying? Like, in them, this isn't, it's shocking, but it's also shocking for the reason of their faith. It's more shocking of that, like seeing a hand, like the stories of Elijah and fireballs. These aren't just stories that were just heard yesterday.
Miracles.
Miracles were happening.
Yeah.
So for a hand to come out of the wall during that time, you know, it's as common as somebody saying back in, you know, the times of, you know, Adam and Eve saying we seen dragons. We hear those stories, a Leviathan. Those, like, if you go up to any Hebrew who keeps, or any Jewish person who keeps the documents of the day, and you tell them about a behemoth, they won't be shocked. They don't have a real recollection of what it is. So
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying? Even in Daniel's day, Daniel and the dragon, everybody's, oh, it's a fairy tale with dragon. Oh, it's.
Yeah.
And you'll see even in the handwriting itself, when the Chaldeans came in, they was also afraid, and they didn't know. But when Daniel came in, Daniel was not afraid.
No.
You see what I'm saying? Because Daniel knew. You know, I mean, he's 80-some years old now. He's seen a lot happen. And like you said, with Nebuchadnezzar, he was somebody just walk out of the woods and say, ooh. I was a cow out there for 7 years. Right.
You cut my hair and trim my nails.
God did a lot of things back then to where,
Yeah.
I mean, who's back in the day, we was like, yeah, that's God right now. And Daniel knew it when he walked in the room. He wasn't shocked.
But see, Daniel was shocked, but just looking at the verse 9 is where they explain this, that the king, Belshazzar was greatly troubled. His countenance was changed and his lords were astonished. I mean, they were still astonished at what was going on.
Yeah.
It was still there.
Yeah, even though, I agree, miracles was happening and it wasn't as we see it today. But still, they were shook up.
Mm.
They saw his handwriting on the wall and they were shook up. And to the point of, his face went pale and
Mhm.
he fell down, his knees was broken, everything else. So we see what happened, we see what God did, and the king watched the hand as it wrote. He turned pale and frightened, his knees knocking, and he gave away. The king shouted for his Chaldeans to come in and read this right. First, read it and tell me what it means. It's the same story as we've been reading in Daniel in previous chapters with Nebuchadnezzar and, all along. These visions and dreams came to these kings or others that they could not explain. They couldn't understand. And Daniel, usually the one that came in at the last one to come in and interpret these dreams and tell them what they meant.
The next thing that was scary to them, not only they saw it, but they didn't know what it was saying.
Exactly. They didn't know what it meant.
Exactly.
When Daniel walked in the room,
He
he
knew.
knew what it was saying, and also that Daniel had interpreted the dream.
Yeah.
So when Daniel looked at it, he wasn't shocked because he really understood the dream. But it says, many TKL you portion. Daniel was summing it up. Daniel was saying, your time is up.
I'm done.
Okay, so this is why Daniel wasn't shocked, because what Daniel seen, Daniel knew it was coming, and now he knew it at the time. And I know he knew it was the time, because why would you want to be third in charge when it's only going to be for a short time? Because they keep your stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, so Daniel wasn't shocked because immediately he knew fulfillment. But the rest of them had no recollection what that means, but that was fear of them. They didn't know, and if they would have knew what it meant, they would have even been more afraid. Their kingdom is up.
God wasn't with them.
So this is why Daniel wasn't shocked, because when he seen it, he immediately knew this is the fulfillment of this dream that your daddy had. Or your grandfather had years before. Had he walked in and been like the rest of them baffled, then he would have been kind of perplexed. But he wasn't, because he knew the interpretation of the writing.
And
Yeah,
they knew. Go ahead.
I would say like you said, Daniel had no reason for fear because Daniel, he knew what was going on. And I was just messing up when he said that, if somebody else was there, they would understood it. But just like Daniel wasn't there, those people who understood it would never have been right. We're looking at, what was being taught on Sunday, right? They're private. These people would never have been able to read it. A hand coming out of the blue to them is no clue where it could possibly come from, because we have no understanding of God. It's like the part that you kind of touched on. They have no understanding of God because their understanding of God is gold, silver, and bronze. If it's none of those things, it must not be God.
Yeah. Put it in the vernacular today. You take a non-believer who don't understand, they react different to things. If they lose a loved one and have no recollection of scripture, they react different. That's why Paul says, sorrow like those who have no hope. We react different because we have information.
Exactly.
Daniel had information. Okay, he had prior information, and he had information when he walked in on it. They didn't have prior information, and they didn't have information. You got to remind you, Belshazzar knew those articles that was in there.
Oh, he knew.
He knew his granddaddy got those. And so it wasn't like, oh, what are those vessels doing in there?
He blatantly
He knew.
disobeyed. He blatantly disregarded, because he never believed. He blatantly disregarded the facts.
So a non-believer even has spiritual things different than a believer.
Right.
They handle them flippantly. And that's what he did. He handled these holy articles flippantly. And then when the Holy One writes on the wall, he's not only afraid that he sees it, but he's afraid that he can't interpret it. And his face turned ash white. And he was a little relieved when the soothsayers came in. But then when they could tell, his face turned ash white again. Then when Daniel came in and interpreted, he had a little relief, just a little, because he got a short time.
Just a little before a little while too, yeah. And you know, even because he was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, so he had to know.
He knew, because when Daniel come in and say, "Are you the one who interprets dreams?" So he
Daniel,
knows.
Daniel, and that comes later on. Daniel puts it to him. And you know, just like when Nebuchadnezzar, it took a year for God to strike, right? And during that time, as we were reading in the previous chapter, he got bold again. There was some time that went by, and okay, nothing happened today. I'm gonna take a little more. I'm gonna do a little more. I'm gonna get a little bit more emboldened within myself. And that happened for 12 months. And then we know what happened. Well,
Yeah, I'm listening to everybody, and I just see this a little differently. I think that, number one, and it was well established that who these people were.
Mhm.
They had no regard for God,
Mhm.
period, anyway.
Mhm.
So I feel that when that hand wrote on that wall, it froze everybody. It froze, this froze everybody. They were so, and we all, in the Bible, this king was so scared, we always saw he turned pale.
Mhm.
But the thing of it was that I think everybody in that room, why? Because number one, this is something that they ain't never seen before. A hand, and I understand what my brother said earlier, but this hand is right on the wall that nobody never seen or nobody, they couldn't even comprehend what this was. And and as a pastor, when Daniel came in, number one, I think the first thing Daniel saw was the writing, and he already interpreted when he saw the writing. So Daniel had already summed up what was going on. Yeah. Before, as he walked into that room. So I feel that.
Go ahead, continue.
I feel that, again, I think that everybody was just frozen into space when they saw it. They didn't know what it was. When he called his the Sayseers and all those, the charters, all of them in there, they couldn't figure it out. I think this was the beginning of the end. That even in his mind, he had no knowledge of what it was. He had no knowledge that this was his last day. Yeah. But I just think that all the whole scenario, it just froze them.
And you know,
one more thing, now you notice it did now. We don't know how many people ran out of there. His Bible never says that. That's why I'm saying with those, it was so startling that people just froze. Yeah. And they wanted to know what this was. I mean, we couldn't have been us, because we the record. I would go. Somebody would have to be telling me about what happened.
Yeah, you heard what happened last night. Man,
you missed it. You missed it.
No, that's just mine. That's what I see, and I don't want to get ahead of you, but we already know what Daniel pointed out to him from his grandfather.
And to your point, you know, when whatever the king feels or whatever the king believes, that's what his people going to be.
And also now, I think the people probably was talking among themselves, trying to figure this out, and at some point, that's why he called the fortune tellers in because we can't figure it out. Call them. So they was shocked so much to the fact that they didn't run, but they was trying to figure it out. They was trying to figure what is this, you know?
It's like a
This
shock.
writing is beyond all language that we know.
Yeah.
You know?
So,
So now call them.
You got a combination of things that's
Yes.
happening right now.
yes,
And it's all happening to them in their drunken stupor that sobered them up. This is me talking. It sobered them up.
I believe that.
And because you have a hand without a body, it's writing on the wall. Number two, is writing something you don't understand. Number three.
Can I interject right there? in that
Go
part?
ahead.
So the words they were writing, they actually, it was the combination of words, and this is why.
Let's not get into the meaning of the words.
No,
just yet.
then that's what I'm saying. It was the combination. So if I came up on, if anybody in here, let's say right now, a hand wrote on the word on the wall, faith, hope, love. And all of us seen it right up there. Even if it's a language we don't know, we still don't question the fact that somebody need to come tell us what faith, hope, love means. So those words particular were words that they understood, but the particular grouping of the words, not only just a hand coming out of nowhere writing them, is what really it perplexed them. These words not only appeared out of nowhere, but these are words that mean something to us that I don't know what they
If
mean.
something's written on the wall in front of you, that means you're supposed to read it, then you can't.
You can't figure it out.
Now, the thing about it is when he sent for the other men and Daniel, they didn't see the hand. All they saw was the writing.
Right.
So they didn't get the initial shock that everybody else got. All they saw was
Right.
what we call the leftovers. What they had.
Because the words are Aramaic.
And that was disturbing enough
Yeah.
because they could not understand, they couldn't read it. Not only could they not interpret it, they couldn't even read it. They didn't know what it was.
Because everybody didn't know Aramaic at the time. Remember that's a language they were bringing over with the Hebrews. Now, some people may have translated, but remember, Daniel was somebody who, when he came over, he knew he had that knowledge provided to him by God. So
And Daniel was God's messenger.
right. So when we look at the words, it's multiple facets of what shocked these people. And since we just talking about what shocked them, one, a hand coming out of nowhere. Right. Two, words that we know that means something to us in a particular order that doesn't make sense. To see these words in this particular order, we know what they mean, but we don't know why they are in that order and what they mean, which scares us even more. Because as a king, I should be able to look at that and say, I know what that means, but a king does know. He does know.
You couple that with what King said, you know, I know I'm doing something wrong.
I know that words for me is particular.
That's a little frightening for me because I don't know, mom getting ready to beat my butt or what? I don't know. You know, as opposed to if you're writing coloring in your book, you're not worried about getting a whooping. Right? All of that goes together. And so you can imagine what was, you know, what the feeling was. Pretty much put yourself in that situation. You said you would have been gone. They would have had to tell you about it. A whole lot of other people would have been gone too. But that's what happened. And of course, his conjurers and his Chaldeans, they could not read it. They could not tell him what it meant. And these are wise men of Babylon. That's who the king kept around him. But just as in the old days, they were the same type of people as in Nebuchadnezzar's day. They operated the same way. They're conjurers, they're fortune tellers, they are this and they're that. They're not God.
It's Babylon east of Jerusalem. He's the best man.
I'm not sure about that. I probably got it written somewhere, but I'm not sure.
Babylon located in present-day Iraq.
Yeah. So
Babylon's present-day Iraq. Kind of to the west.
yeah, to the west.
Right.
No, the west. To the west, right?
No,
East.
East.
The reason I'm asking that is kind of off subject. Do you think that the men that came and presented gifts to to Jesus at his birth was in this bunch. That, and they told the stories to their descendants all down about the star and Saint Daniel. And those three boys might have been educating them while they were there about the coming Messiah. And you'll see his star, and because they came from the east. So
It is.
Feasible, right?
uh,
Something to think about, right?
that's, so you think these wise men ancestors came from this area and they told the story all the way down in your house, they knew about the star.
Yeah.
But that didn't, we had, we'll get to that.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so we already established the king and his nobles and his entourage did not let even the Medo-Persian Empire spoil their little party. He didn't care. That fear, that laughter was turned to fear, and at the snap of your finger. So they, you know, I don't. It matters not how we look at it now, and we may look at it a little bit slightly different from each other. We all know that God did it, and it did what God intended for it to do. Right? Okay. Where was I? So I think I mentioned this. What God did is what the Medo-Persian Empire could not do. And remember this, you know, even Belshazzar's father was out fighting wars, whatever he was doing. So it's not like, you know, nothing was going on. But in the middle of Belshazzar's having this big feast, different words that we've called it, and with no concern about what's going on outside of his walls. I've jotted something else down about the phrase writing on the wall, right? And from that time to right now today, we have a certain feeling about that phrase, writing on the wall, right? We see it as something that's inevitable. When we use that phrase, we usually, it's going to happen, right? That's just, it hasn't changed over all of these years. You know, we see it as something, maybe not something altogether negative, but we see it as something that's it's going to happen. When we use that term, that's what we're referring to. The writing is on the wall. You know, like I did something that today that my mom's going to tell my dad about. So the writing is on the wall. I know what's going to happen at 4:30. My dad's coming home. Writing is on the wall. Maybe that's where the expression came from. Maybe that's where it originated. Right? With Belshazzar, I'm sorry. I see it, Belshazzar. Let's look at Proverbs 29:1. You don't have to go there. I'll read it for you. Proverbs 29:1 says, a man who hardens his neck after much reproof will suddenly be broken beyond remedy. Verse 10, starting in verse 10, we're looking at our response, that fourth lesson outline that I spoke about in the beginning, our response. So as this is going on, as you can imagine, there's a lot of noise going on, a lot of you know, people in their stupor, trying to figure out what's going on, a lot of noise, a lot of happenings. The queen, having heard the commotion, came into the hall and said to the king, "O king, live forever." I like how that's how they start their sentence. Let's start there. When they talking to the king, they all say the same thing. O king, live forever. Learn, there's a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy God in him. This man, Daniel, has a keen mind and knowledge and understanding and has the ability to interpret dreams. Back to my.
Queen.
Yeah, that wasn't Belshazzar's wife. That was Belshazzar's father's wife. Because Belshazzar's father is the king, right?
Right, so she probably wasn't in this.
She wasn't at the party.
The reason I asked, because she had been saying that she would be an older woman, because she
Came
knows
to
about
Daniel.
Daniel. And she probably was told about Daniel, doing by her husband, she experienced it with her husband about Daniel, so she knows.
She's seen it firsthand. She
Yeah.
knows Daniel.
And
She
it-
knows what he's capable of doing. That's why she's telling.
Right, and
Bell-
usually a son wouldn't have his mother in this type of party anyway.
Yeah, you would think. At least not around me. So they she says, call for Daniel and he will tell you what the writings mean. When Daniel is brought in and the king explains what he wants, here come the promises and rewards and all this stuff again. And it's recurring. Same thing each king does, right? If you give me what I want, the usual rewards. I'll give you gifts, I'll give you rewards, and I'll make you the third most important person in the kingdom. Again, same thing. Daniel's heard this, what, 2 or 3 times now? Daniel says to the king, keep your gifts and give your rewards to someone else. Why did he say that? Ken spoke about it a little earlier. Why did he say?
Y'all want somebody here?
Say again?
Y'all want somebody here? Okay, you see, Daniel, this is verse 13, who is one of the exiles from Judah. So he knew about Daniel, but he didn't really know Daniel. Right. Missed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I heard about you. So somebody had told him, right? And just now he's wise man. So you just read about Daniel speaking to the king. What verse was that? Then Daniel answered before the king. Okay, now 17. Now notice in verse 10 what the queen said. She said, "O king, live forever." You see that?
Mm-hmm.
That means that she don't know what the handwriting said, because she's saying, "O king, live forever." But when Daniel speaks here, Daniel answers the king and said before the king, he didn't say live forever, because he know what that writing means.
Yeah.
You know that the king should not live forever. So that's how they address the king. "Oh, king, live forever." Right? And so Daniel knew what the writing said on the wall. He wouldn't say, "Oh, king, live forever," because he knows that his time is up. And also, when he offered Daniel his gift, Daniel said, "Keep your gifts for yourself, because making me third ruler, I only be a third ruler for a couple of hours."
Because that same night.
You know, I don't, so I don't, why even take your gifts? Keep them for yourself.
That's exactly why he said what he said.
So, and it's very small. Like, actually, Daniel kind of answered the question before we even get to the end of what it is. He answered at 18. Basically, he said, "I told Nebuchadnezzar what I'm telling you." Like, it says, "This dream, I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen."
Most I didn't say live forever.
Yeah, and it says, "You declare the same interpretation there," but it's basically saying, like, all I'm telling you is the same thing that I told him. You're just gonna get your version of it. And up to date, right here in your face. I've been interpreting dreams for y'all this whole time, telling y'all this kingdom wasn't gonna last. Yeah, y'all keep fighting for it. Why, it's more of like, all right, here I am again. I'm an older man, and y'all pulling me back into the same thing. Y'all kingdom ain't okay. You update. Here's the update. The Persians are in the gate. What you gonna do about it? I'll continue to party.
Yeah. And like I said, I think I said it a couple of chapters ago. You know, this king don't have to be smart, right? He just have to be in the right bloodline, right? You come from the right family, you inherit the king, not right family, the correct family. You inherit the kingship. You don't have to be smart. As you can see, some of these kings were children, you know, deformed, whatever the case may. You don't have to be smart and you know, smarter than everybody else and know things that other people don't. You don't have to have all of that. All you have to have is the right blood running in your veins, and you inherit this kingship. And like you said, Daniel didn't want, and it's not just because Daniel knew that this kingdom was coming to an end. Daniel didn't want these rewards and gifts that Nebuchadnezzar was offering him. He didn't want it then either. If you go back to a couple chapters, Daniel said, "Give it to give or honor God, my God. Don't honor me." That's what he told King Nebuchadnezzar. And here, 2 kings later, he's telling Belshazzar, keep your gifts, keep your rewards, because if you still don't know, I'm getting ready to tell you, your reign is coming to an end. It is 8 o'clock and I'm gonna stop there. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there and we'll pick up the rest of chapter 5 next week and go into hopefully chapter 6. Any questions? Any comments? Any information?